welcome to the first episode of the reboot of Ask a Pastor. I did this many years ago, and I did a poll with you guys to see if I should bring it back, and you overwhelmingly encouraged me to do so. So do me a favor, help spread the word, help get the word out, share it, like it, comment, do all the things. And help me get the word out about this show, podcast, whatever you want to call it. And so I'm excited to be here with you today. My hope is that this world that we live in says that the church is not answering questions, that the church doesn't tackle the hard conversations. And so what my hope is that in this show, you can ask me whatever you want to ask, and I'm going to answer. So if you'd like to ask a question today, I have a full script, a full show of what I'm going to talk about. So if you would like to ask me a question, drop it in the comments. Drop it in the comments, whether you're watching YouTube, Facebook. If you're listening to this in the audio form on a podcast, I just want to encourage you to send an email. You can email my assistant, Kayla, Kayla, at hopechurchcleburne.com. She'll get it on my list, and make sure you watch, and I will answer your future questions on a future episode. And I just want you to know, there is no question that is off limits. I'm happy to answer whatever you want. I don't have anything to hide, and I want to answer your questions. And later on in future episodes, we'll do live questions, and I'll let you know when those are going to happen. But like, share, comment, do all the things. And so I thought I would kick it off, since this is Easter week. I thought I'd kick it off with an Easter episode. So you see in the title is, how can we know that the resurrection really happened? And so today, my hope is that I'm going to talk about some theories that people try to explain the way the resurrection, and I'm going to debunk those theories. And then I'm going to end with giving you some evidence as why we know that the resurrection of Jesus Christ really happened. Because this Sunday, we celebrate the resurrection, we celebrate Easter, and we celebrate that our Lord has risen from the dead. And if that is true, which I'm hoping to prove that to you, if that is true, that should change every aspect of our lives. So let's get into it. Let's start with theories. So theories that try to explain away the resurrection. The first theory is the hallucination theory. And so the hallucination theory claims that the disciples imagined seeing Jesus because that's what they wanted to happen. They wanted him to rise. Now, here's the problem with that. The problem is, number one, the disciples were not expecting him to rise. In fact, they didn't know that he was going to rise. They weren't going to the tomb to look for him to rise. In fact, it was a bunch of women that actually went to the tomb. It wasn't even the disciples themselves. And so the disciples were not expecting him to rise. Another problem is Jesus was seen physically after the resurrection. And he was recognized. He spoke to people. He ate with people. Thomas touched his body. And also, this theory doesn't explain away that there was an empty tomb. And so the bottom line is that hallucinations don't eat fish or leave their tombs. And so if this theory were to be true, the problem with it is that Jesus ate fish with the disciples, and he was seen by not just one, not just two, but thousands of people. And the biblical record in which where he was seen was spread throughout. And so, excuse me, if they were making it up, then people would have known that it was a fallacy. So hallucination theory was number one. Number two, there's objective vision theory. And so this claims is that God gave visions to show Jesus' spirit lived on. Here's the problem with that. The problem with that one is that Jesus emphasized, and the accounts emphasize, that there was a bodily resurrection, not just a spiritual resurrection. Jesus' bodily raising was what actually happened, was actually seen by all. And so that debunks this theory. Number three is the imposter theory. The imposter theory claims that someone pretended to be Jesus. But here's the problem. Multiple groups recognized him. And the close followers like Peter and John, they weren't fooled. Because here's the thing. My family knows me well. And if an imposter of Todd Barham came home, my wife would know it. My wife is a detective. She watches 2020. Those are the things that she loves. And so if I came home, if somebody else came home other than me, my wife would know it. And that also requires a massive amount of coordinated deception. What we've known throughout history is humans aren't necessarily capable of having massive amounts of coordinated deception. Number four, the stolen body theory. The stolen body theory. This claims that the disciples stole the body. Here's some problems with that theory. The disciples were fearful and hidden. They were a bunch of scaredy cats that ran away. So you're saying that they went from a bunch of people that fled to now they are taking on the Roman army. Uh, Another is why did they die for something that they knew that was a lie? Why did the disciples die for something that they knew was a lie? All the disciples, most of them, not all, but most of them died a horrific death, going to their grave saying that Jesus had risen from the dead. So you don't see throughout history that people die for something that is false. And again, this doesn't explain away the post resurrection appearances that Jesus had in many different ways. So, and the fifth and finally is it the only conclusion that we can come to with all of these is that it really happened. It really happened. So, the evidence that we have for the resurrection of Jesus. What are the evidence that we have? And so now we're going to flip the script and actually talk about what evidence we truly have. Now, these are a bunch of theories that you've seen, and you will probably, there's more out there. I know there's the swoon theory that Jesus wasn't really dead, and he went to the grave, but that's not really even a good theory, because even if he was almost dead, he was wrapped. And so he probably would have eventually died in the tomb. But what are some really hardcore evidences that we have that Jesus was actually risen from the dead? The first is all the eyewitness testimonies. Jesus didn't just appear to one person, he appeared to many. He appeared to Mary Magdalene, other women. He appeared to the two disciples on the road to the Emmaus. He appeared to Peter, the 10 disciples, the 11 disciples with Thomas, 7 disciples by the sea. And the Bible talks about a large group. And also the Bible talks about that over 500 people at once saw him. And this was distributed in the area that they saw him. And so if they didn't actually see him, they would have said something about it. So here's the key insight, is that most of them, Paul later in his writings said that most of these people that saw him are still alive. And he said, if you don't believe me, go ask him. And that's a pretty bold statement from Paul. If you don't believe me, go ask them. The next evidence we have is the empty tomb. All 4 gospels emphasize there was an empty tomb. Even opponents have to explain why the tomb was empty. They can't deny that the body is not there because the Romans didn't produce the body. Let me tell you, the Romans, the greatest empire, one of the greatest empires throughout history, all they had to do was produce the body of Jesus, and it would squash Christianity, but they never could do it. Because if the body is still in the tomb, Christianity dies instantly. But they couldn't do it. They didn't do it. And no one throughout history has ever been able to prove that the body wasn't there. Or been able to prove that the body didn't actually leave the tomb. He's not there. He has risen. Another evidence is the transformation of the disciples. Before, they were afraid, they were hiding, they were confused. But after, they were bold, preaching publicly, willing to die for Jesus. Nearly all were martyred, screaming out that Jesus is alive. Guys, listen, nobody dies for what they know is a lie. And so if every single one of these men died a martyr's death, saying that Jesus is alive, maybe, maybe, just maybe, we should take notice. Another evidence is the existence of the church today. The early church exploded throughout Jerusalem. This was the very place that Jesus was alive. This is the very place that Jesus was killed. This is the very place that if they knew it was a hoax, they could talk about it. And so if the resurrection is false, then the church is a giant hoax. But something happened. You critical thinkers have to think something happened that launched the church throughout the world. And what we believe as Christians, what we believe is what happened was the resurrection of Jesus. They saw Jesus die, but now he is alive. And if that is true, we have hope that we need to spread throughout all the world. Another evidence is the shift to Sunday worship. Originally, the Jews worshipped on Saturday, and now we have shifted our worship to Sunday. Suddenly, before thousands of years, Jews had worshipped on Saturday, and now suddenly Christians worship on Sunday. Why? Because Jesus rose on a Sunday. And this Sunday, if you're listening, this Sunday where I'm recording this right now, this Sunday is Easter Sunday, and we are celebrating that same resurrection this Sunday. Why? Because Jesus rose, and we have the hope of the world. Another testimony is that the New Testament itself bears witness to the resurrection. It's written by eyewitnesses and those that claim not that just claim, those that were close to Jesus. And it's a unified message across multiple authors. Because here's the thing, here's the question you have to ask yourself. Where did the New Testament come from if it was not based upon real events? Because the story is consistent across many different authors, across different geographies. You have to ask yourself, how, if they were making it up, how did they get it right so closely together? Another is the fulfillment of prophecy. The Old Testament predicted the resurrection theme, and Jesus fulfills all of them. The resurrection fits into the larger prophetic story. God talked about from the garden that God was coming to stamp out the devil. Well, what's the way to do that? What's the way to do that? You conquer death. And Jesus fulfilled each and every one. I talked about on Sunday. He went through a horrific death. He was probably irrecognizable as a human being, but not a single bone in his body was broken. Why? It was prophesied that not a single bone, because you know that in the Jewish custom in the Old Testament, a paschal lamb, a lamb that takes away the sin, had to be an unblemished lamb, a lamb that did not have a broken bone, a lamb that was not blemished. And Jesus was that paschal lamb. Jesus was that Passover lamb for us that took away the sins of the world. And the last evidence that we have, and I'm sure there's many, many more, is that it completes the entire Christian story. The resurrection completes the entirety of the Christian story. It goes from sin in the garden to God's plan at the cross to the resurrection, which leads to the redemption of the world. Without it, Christianity collapses. Without it, there's no victory over death. Without it, there's no future resurrection for his church. And without it, there is no gospel. So where does that land us today? Where does this land us in this Ask a Pastor segment today? Where does that land us? It lands us with this. Every theory trying to explain away the resurrection has to ignore the evidence. But the evidence naturally points towards one conclusion. And what is that conclusion? The tomb was empty. People saw him alive, and everything changed because of it. So I want to encourage you. Maybe you don't believe this, but if it weren't true, why this Sunday is every church across the world going to celebrate that the tomb is empty and Jesus has risen? And one day, if we accept that relationship with him, one day we will be able to conquer death just in the same way that he did. One day we will be able to conquer death. So I want to encourage you with this. Maybe you're watching this today. Maybe you're not a part of Hope Church here in Cleburne. I want to encourage you this Sunday, just go to church. Just go to church and see what the people are doing. See what the people are celebrating. Because if you come to my church, what you're going to see is a group of people that are celebrating that we have hope. That even in the midst of this crazy war-torn world that we're living in right now, we have hope in Jesus. Why? Because the resurrection speaks that Jesus is alive. He's no longer in the grave. And one day, you and I will no longer have to be in our grave. And if we choose Jesus, if we live for him, we can be in heaven with him forever. So I'll just encourage you. Maybe you don't believe in God. Maybe you don't believe in the resurrection. Do some research. What the research shows you is that there is no body in the grave. You can go to the grave, but it's empty. What you can see is that Jesus is alive and he is coming for us. So I want to encourage you, if you don't have a church to go to the church that's closest to you. If you're in the Johnson County, Cleburne area, come to Hope Church. Remember, Hope Church, we have 3 services, 8:30, 10, and 11:30. You are not going to want to miss it. It is going to be an awesome Easter Sunday. We've got a lot coming your way. I want this to be beneficial to you. This is the first episode. This will probably be a little shorter than the other episodes. I want to answer your questions. So drop your questions in the comments. If I got something wrong, tell me in the comments. I would love to correct myself. And because I want to give you the truth. I don't want to give you my opinion. I want to give you the truth. This world is full of people giving their opinions, and I'm not interested in my opinion. I'm interested in the truth. And my hope for this podcast is that we can bring the truth to you, because you live in a world where you don't know who to believe. And I'm not saying necessarily that you can believe me, but what I'm saying is I'm bringing the truth, and I know that you can believe in the truth of Jesus Christ. So if you're watching, drop a comment, drop your question in the comments, or you can email us. Email my assistant, Kayla, Kayla at hopechurchcleburne.com, and she'll get it on my rundown to talk about next time. I'll see how many questions I get and how frequently I have to do this. But if it's overwhelming, I'll try to do one next week. But send me your questions. I would love to answer all your questions. I would love to be a resource to you. But I hope you have an awesome Easter Sunday. I hope you have an awesome week. And just know this: Jesus is alive, the tomb is empty, and we have